My life almost ended because of my wife. See how I escaped and rebuilt everything. I never imagined I'd reach this point in my life. My name is Leandro. I'm 38 years old, and I've always considered myself a balanced person who knew how to deal with problems with a cool head. But there was a day that changed everything, a day that made me realize that life can turn upside down in an instant, that people you trust can turn into silent enemies. It was an ordinary morning, but it's etched in my memory as if it had happened yesterday. I woke up early with that strange feeling that something was wrong. My wife, Vanessa, was strangely distant. I was always suspicious of small things, but that day, a message on my cell phone revealed the truth. She was plotting to deceive me, using our divorce as a weapon to take everything I'd built. The shock was instantaneous, and a mixture of anger, disbelief, and fear washed over me. I couldn't believe that the woman I'd shared years of my life with could plan something so cold-hearted. And the worst part was that there was someone collaborating with her, Igor, her lover, who had no qualms whatsoever. I felt vulnerable, betrayed, but also a strange clarity began to dawn. If I didn't act, I would lose everything. The desperation sent a chill down my spine, but it also propelled me to think strategically, as I've always done in my life. I spent hours analyzing every detail, every gesture Vanessa made, every conversation I'd had with her over the past few months. I tried not to let anger or fear overwhelm me, even though they consumed me. I called my mother, Gloria, who had always been my rock, my voice of reason when everything seemed to be falling apart. She listened to everything, without judgment, with just that calm she always had, which made me feel like there was still ground to stand on. Talking to her gave me strength, made me realize I still had control over my life, that I didn't need to fall victim to Vanessa's wiles. Her every word was a reminder that I could protect myself, that intelligence and patience could overcome manipulation. I needed to be silent, precise, methodical. The decision to act wasn't easy, because it involved relying on legal strategies I'd never used in my personal life. But I was determined. It wasn't just about money or possessions, it was about dignity, respect, and my own sanity. Meanwhile, Mateus, a mutual acquaintance, began to emerge as an unexpected piece in this puzzle. He brought me information I couldn't ignore, details about Vanessa's relationship with Igor, about how she planned to manipulate me financially. The mix of relief and fear was confusing. On the one hand, I finally had proof. On the other, I realized the extent of the scam was greater than I'd imagined. Every conversation, every piece of information Mateus shared with me left me feeling a pang of deep anger, but also clarity. I couldn't act impulsively. The situation required intelligence and patience, something that had always been my strength. I felt my heart pounding, but for the first time amidst the chaos, I felt hope. If I acted correctly, I could turn the tables. And it was in that moment, sitting alone in the living room, staring at documents, bills, and contracts, that I realized the gravity of what I was about to face. The weight of betrayal was crushing, but the possibility of overcoming it all gave me a strength I hadn't even known I possessed. I remember feeling a strange mix of shame and anger. Shame for having trusted Vanessa so much, anger for having been manipulated. But alongside these feelings, something new was growing inside me, resilience. I began writing down in my notebook everything that needed to be done, step by step, to ensure nothing could be taken from me. Each line was a commitment to myself, a silent pact that I would not be defeated. And it was at that moment that I realized the battle wasn't just against Vanessa and Igor. It was against the fear, doubt, and sense of helplessness that were trying to paralyze me. My mind, previously consumed by shock, began to clear. I needed to be quick, but also strategic. I couldn't make mistakes. Every detail was crucial. Every action needed to be precise, because now not only my possessions were at stake, but also my very dignity and emotional freedom. As I finished my notes, a feeling of lightness washed over me, mixed with the weariness of someone who has carried the weight of betrayal for years, without realizing it. For the first time, I felt like I had an escape route, that there was a real chance of winning this silent war. It wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine, but about proving to myself that I still had control over my life. I took a deep breath, and it was as if that first step, though silent, had already changed everything. Determination began to replace the pain. Hope began to overcome the fear. I was still exhausted, emotionally shaken, but I had found clarity. I knew it wouldn't be easy, that the battle would be long and psychological, but in that moment, I felt I was finally ready to face whatever came, to turn the tables and rebuild my life. In the days that followed, I began to act much more carefully. Each decision was made calmly, as if I were playing a silent game of chess, where any wrong move could be fatal. I transferred my assets to a trust, something that seemed distant and bureaucratic, but which proved to be the perfect protection against Vanessa and Igor's manipulation. The weight of the decision consumed me for hours. I felt fear, yes, fear of being discovered, fear that my strategy would fail, fear that I had lost control of my own life. But deep down, I knew this was the only way to preserve what I had built. The sense of relief at seeing that my assets and accounts were safe was mixed with a pang of sadness. Sadness at having to act like this, at realizing that someone I loved so much could plot my ruin. At the same time, I felt an enormous strength grow within me. I was finally putting myself first, protecting my dignity, my safety, and my mind. And it was at that moment that I realized overcoming is not about eliminating pain, but learning to live with it while building something better. My mother, Gloria, continued to be my unwavering support. Every phone call, every conversation, every piece of practical advice was a reminder that I wasn't alone. Her presence made me feel protected, like I could face anything, with someone by my side who truly cared. Talking to her gave me clarity about boundaries. I needed to distance myself from the toxic, manipulative person and preserve my emotional energy. I remember feeling a mixture of anger and gratitude as she listened to me, because anger was inevitable in the face of betrayal. But the gratitude was greater for having someone who didn't judge, who simply guided me safely. It was like breathing after suffocating for so long. Her every word strengthened me and reminded me that I had the right to protect my life and my possessions. That relationship gave me the courage to keep going, to not give in to the psychological pressure Vanessa tried to impose, even from afar. Mateus, the acquaintance who unexpectedly became a key player, continued to bring me crucial information. Every detail he revealed about Vanessa and Igor was a punch in the gut, but also an opportunity to better prepare myself. The initial shock passed, and a sense of control I hadn't felt in years began to emerge. Understanding their actions before they happened empowered me, and with it came an emotional clarity I hadn't expected. I began to plan every interaction, every response, and even my silence. Every word spoken or omitted became strategic, because the battle was now psychological. I felt fear, of course, but also a quiet strength, a renewed confidence that I could win. Each night, alone, I reflected on how to deal with the manipulation, how to protect my sanity, while still maintaining my ethics. It was exhausting, but necessary. The turning point began to solidify when Vanessa realized she no longer had control over anything. Her frustration was palpable, even from a distance, and it gave me a sense of silent victory. It wasn't about humiliation, but about taking back my life without relying on others. The emotional battle that began that day was intense. Every gesture, every word she spoke felt like an attempt to pressure me, but I was prepared. The fear and anger were still there, but now there was clarity, strategy, and legal protection that gave me strength. I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and empowerment. Tired of carrying the weight of manipulation, but empowered to finally act fairly, safely, and effectively. Deep down, I realized that experience changed the way I view relationships, trust, and boundaries. I learned that it's possible to love someone but still protect yourself when they choose to manipulate and betray. I learned that my dignity cannot be negotiated and that emotional strength is as important as intelligence or financial resources. I felt fear, anger, despair, but I also felt clarity, hope, and a relief I hadn't felt in years. And it was at that moment that I understood. Overcoming grief isn't about forgetting, but about rebuilding, protecting yourself, and resuming life with awareness and strength. The day everything began to change truly remains etched in my memory. I was alone at home, reviewing documents and contracts that had cost me sleepless nights, and I felt an intense mix of anxiety and determination. Every paper I signed, every asset transfer to the trust, made me feel the weight of responsibility, but also the lightness of finally protecting myself. It wasn't just about money. It was about proving to myself that I could rise up in the face of betrayal and manipulation. I felt betrayed, deceived, but at the same time more alive than ever because I was taking control of my own life. The fear was still there, the butterflies in the stomach of someone facing something unknown, but now it was accompanied by a quiet confidence. I knew I had done what I had to do to avoid defeat. I remember feeling angry at Vanessa, angry at Igor, but also angry at myself for taking so long to realize what was happening. It was a different kind of anger, more reflective, that drove me to act intelligently and strategically, without letting myself be consumed by hatred. Each step needed to be calculated. I realized that silence is often the greatest weapon, and using patience to my advantage became a form of resistance. The fear of losing everything taught me to value my own security and the importance of trusting only those who truly care about me. This clarity gave me strength I didn't know existed, and I felt an internal shift from victim to someone who fights, who protects herself, who refuses to be manipulated. My mother, Gloria, remained by my side, even from a distance. Every call with her was a reminder that I wasn't alone, that there was someone who believed in me even when I doubted myself. Her presence gave me comfort and confidence, something words alone couldn't convey. I felt deep gratitude, mixed with quiet relief. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe without feeling like I was about to fall apart. She taught me that overcoming stress isn't just about reacting, but about preparing and protecting yourself. And it was this learning that began to change my perspective on the situation. I didn't need to exhaust myself emotionally. I could be strategic and still maintain my ethics and dignity. Meanwhile, Mateus brought me information that was essential to understanding the full extent of Vanessa and Igor's plan. Each revelation shocked me, but also made me more determined. With this information, I began to visualize every step they would take and anticipate it, never losing my composure. A sense of control began to replace the despair. I still felt the pain of betrayal, but now I knew I would no longer be held hostage. Every detail I discovered strengthened me, made me realize there was hope of emerging from this situation intact. And it was at that moment that I realized that overcoming is silent, internal. No one sees the effort, the strategy, and the pain, but they are there, shaping who you become. At the end of that day, after hours of reviewing contracts and planning my next steps, I felt something rare: lightness. The weight of manipulation began to lift, replaced by a sense of inner power. It wasn't about revenge, it was about protection and rebuilding. I had transformed fear into strategy, anger into clarity, despair into strength. For the first time in a long time, I felt I could move forward, that my life wouldn't be defined by someone who chose to betray me. It was a feeling of quiet victory, a certainty that even in the face of manipulative people, it is possible to regain control of one's life and rebuild one's dignity. What struck me most during that period was realizing how powerful silence can be. Every time Vanessa tried to provoke me, I remained calm. Before, I would have reacted emotionally, argued, or defended myself impulsively. But in that moment, I knew that any rash reaction could be used against me. The sense of control, even if silent, was liberating. Was I afraid? Yes. But it no longer paralyzed me. On the contrary, it reminded me that every decision needed to be made with precision. The clarity I had that day was unprecedented. I realized that overcoming grief isn't about erasing pain, but about learning to live with it while rebuilding your life, making decisions that protect your integrity. My mother, Gloria, continued to be my rock. Every conversation with her reminded me that I didn't have to face everything alone. Her common sense and practicality helped me realize what was important, protecting my assets, my dignity, and my mental health. I felt gratitude, a feeling that mixed relief and strength. Knowing that someone trusted me, that believed in my ability to act justly, gave me the courage to face each challenge. For the first time, I felt I could take control of my life without feeling excessive guilt or fear. She helped me understand that overcoming adversity isn't instantaneous, but that each planned step is a silent victory. Meanwhile, Mateus continued to provide me with valuable insights, showing me how Vanessa and Igor planned each move. The anger still lingered, but clarity grew. I understood that their manipulation only worked because I allowed it to affect me emotionally. So I decided to detach myself from my emotions and focus on strategy. It was mentally exhausting, but each planned action gave me a sense of empowerment I'd never experienced before. The feeling of being one step ahead gave me hope, and that hope began to replace the fear that had previously dominated my thoughts. One of the most memorable moments was realizing Vanessa had discovered she wouldn't have access to my assets. Her frustration was evident, and it brought me a strange sense of relief and justice. It wasn't about material victory, but about regaining control of my life, about proving to myself that I could act correctly and protect everything that was mine without giving in to manipulation. Her every gesture, every attempt at pressure, now seemed powerless. I felt pride in myself, something I hadn't felt in a long time, mixed with the knowledge that there was still much emotional work to do, but that I was on the right path. At the end of that period, I realized something inside me had changed. I was no longer the same vulnerable person who trusted blindly. The fear still existed, the pain too, but there was a silent strength guiding me. I learned that overcoming adversity is about strategy, patience, and emotional clarity, and that even in the face of manipulation and betrayal, it's possible to protect yourself and rebuild your life. I felt profound relief and at the same time renewed energy to carry on, knowing I had won the first major battle against what could have destroyed my life. Over time, I began to feel an internal shift that was difficult to describe. The fear that had previously paralyzed me now transformed into attentiveness and self-care. I knew Vanessa and Igor would continue to try to affect me emotionally, but I had learned not to react impulsively. Every gesture, every word, every silence became elements I could use to protect myself, but also to strengthen my own emotional stability. For the first time, I felt I had control over my life, my feelings, and my decisions. It wasn't a noisy or celebrated victory, but a silent, internal, profound one. It was a feeling I could face any challenge without losing my dignity. My mother, Gloria, continued to be my safe haven. Every conversation with her was a confirmation that I could trust someone and, at the same time, learn to trust myself more. She taught me that strength isn't the absence of fear, but acting despite it. I felt gratitude, recognition, and a quiet energy of hope. I still felt the pain of betrayal, but no longer like a knife in my chest. Now, it was something I carried with me as a lesson, as a reminder that I could overcome situations that seemed impossible. It was a weight that curiously strengthened me. Mateus, who acted as a catalyst in the story, helped me better understand the extent of Vanessa and Igor's manipulation. Every piece of information he provided helped me anticipate moves and maintain my strategy without becoming emotionally drained. The mental clarity I began to feel was liberating. I realized that overcoming challenges involves not only material protection, but also caring for the mind and feelings. Understanding Vanessa's emotional game allowed me to break free from its hold, and this realization brought a profound relief I hadn't felt in years. When I finally realized that Vanessa couldn't reach my assets and that her manipulation was powerless, I felt a sense of victory that didn't need to be shared. I had regained my autonomy and dignity. It wasn't about revenge, but about re-establishing my life without depending on anyone else. The battle had been silent, painful, and intense, but it transformed me. I learned that it's possible to overcome betrayal and manipulation with patience, strategy, and clarity, and that inner strength is more powerful than any external attack. Looking back today, I see that momentous day changed everything. I still feel remnants of the pain, fear, and anger, but they no longer define me. I learned to value my own emotional security, to act with intelligence and patience, and to recognize my own strength. What seemed like a painful end became a turning point. My life isn't perfect, but it's mine, and that gives me a relief and hope I never imagined I'd feel. I learned that overcoming grief isn't about erasing the pain, but about rebuilding, protecting yourself, and finding clarity to move forward.